Hey James, do you like Pokemon?
Yes.
Do you like movies?
Yes.
Well, do I have the movie for you?
Well, what is it, Bill?
It's Detective Pikachu!
Wow.
Hello all, it's James here, and two of my biggest passions are video games and movies. Two forms of media that often do not blend well with each other. So I'm sure it's no surprise to you that when the first trailer for Detective Pikachu dropped, I got very excited. Not only to see one of my favourite video game franchises recreated in live action, but also because it looked like it could be an actually good film. Yesterday was the release of the movie and I went to go see it with a friend, and on the way back I made a bunch of notes about the film. So today we're going to go through those notes and discuss the good and bad of Detective Pikachu. So let's start exactly where the film does with Mewtwo. Naturally, Mewtwo is being tested on in a lab and he escapes and destroys a whole bunch of stuff. This intro is everything I could have asked for. There's a total callback to Pokemon the first movie and I love that so much. Also, this intro really showed that they weren't afraid to get a bit dark with the film. In fact, I don't think I'd actually classify this as a kids movie. I think it's geared more towards adults. I mean, one of the first things we see is Mewtwo chasing someone down and blowing up their car. So yeah, great intro all around. Next up, I want to talk a bit about the world building, because this was probably my favourite thing in the whole film. Every single part of the movie, especially Rhyme City, felt like a living, breathing Pokemon world. If you have at any point wished that Pokemon was real, this film takes you into that world and makes you genuinely feel like these creatures are alive. Everything is so similar to our world, just with Pokemon, and for the people living there, that's how everything is. It's how it's always been, and it sucks you further into this world. I also want to take a minute to just say how much I appreciate all the Pokemon's designs. All the proportions are kept exactly the same. If the Pokemon's got massive eyes, it's got massive eyes in the movie. If it's got a head way bigger than its body, its head is way bigger than its body in the movie. The Pokemon still feel and look exactly like the Pokemon in the games. They look realistic, but like themselves. Something another certain 2019 video game film adaptation could learn a thing or two from. I also want to say that I found the protagonist in Tim Goodman to be a very likable character. He seemed very natural and like just sort of a nice guy, someone you could get along well with. That with the fact that he wasn't really wanting to think about his dad's death and his past of wanting to be a Pokemon trainer, it all made you sort of feel connected to this character and want to see him do well. I also believe that Justice Smith was the strongest member of the cast in this whole film. I'm sort of switching between him and Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds' voice work was also really great in this film, but I thought Justice Smith did an excellent job. A somewhat less excellent job though was done by Catherine Newton in my opinion, especially in her introduction scene. Everything in the film so far had been quite calm and relaxed, but when she is introduced she's all up in Tim's face and all that, and it seemed really out of place with what the film had established itself as so far. Thinking about it later on though, I realised that might have been intentional, as she sort of came across like a Pokemon rival. So if that's what they were going for, I guess this comment is a little less valid, but her performance still felt a little out of place in this film. When Detective Pikachu was introduced, I thought that was much better, and the setup of the mystery when he is introduced, I thought was done pretty well. Not to mention, Detective Pikachu as a character was so fun to watch. Even in this film that can be dark at times, he's always just throwing out one-liners and it totally fits. As I said before, I think Ryan Reynolds did a great job with this character, and also he was kind of relatable, because I too react disgustedly whenever I see a Mr. Mime, and I also sing the Pokemon theme while I cry. Pikachu as a character was easily one of the strongest parts of this whole movie. So after we've been introduced to Detective Pikachu and they've been chased by the Apom, we have probably my favourite scene in the film. The street market scene, where Tim seems completely crazy. He thinks he's going mad, everyone else thinks he's going mad, and Pikachu is just like, calm down. It's brilliant, it had some of the best jokes in the whole movie. So yeah, that was probably my favourite scene, and it was followed up by another pretty good scene, being the Mr. Mime scene. The whole idea of Tim and Pikachu having to find clues by playing a game of charades was really, really great, and the gag with the gasoline in the match, that was brilliant. I really enjoyed this scene. So then they go to this sort of fight club, I guess. And this scene was decent, but I think it could have done with a few improvements. One of the biggest things with this scene is I felt there should have been more conflict between Tim and the guy who was running the fight club. This was one of the only real scenes in the movie that felt like it had high stakes. And if they added more conflict between Tim and the guy running the fight club, it would have just worked a lot better in my opinion. Also, the conclusion was a bit unsatisfying. It left me wanting a bit more. What happens is they release some of the Argas, all the Pokemon go a bit wild, and then Pikachu uses a Magikarp that evolves into a massive Gyarados. That was crazy. And it just sort of washes them all away. For this scene that was set up really well, I feel like it should have had a more satisfying conclusion. I felt like there was more that they could have done with that. After that, Tim and Pikachu get arrested and I have to go talk to, I've forgotten his name, but Ken Watanabe's character. I thought this scene was good because it reflected from that first scene where he came to Rhyme City and was talking about his dad's disappearance. It showed a change in motivation for Tim. It showed that he was going on this character arc. And I also thought this scene was one of the best for showing what Justice Smith could do with this character. This scene was Justice Smith at his absolute strongest in this film. And after that, we have one of the most surprising scenes in the film to me. I did not go into a live action Pokemon movie expecting it to handle emotion as well as it did. In this scene, Tim was feeling sad about how he never really knew his dad, and I was honestly so surprised by how well they handled this. I was not expecting a Pokemon film to be able to handle all that emotional stuff as well as it did. I'm just sort of reading off my notes and like expanding upon them. One of them is literally just, I want Bill Nighy's office. Right, there you go. So after this, Tim and Lucy go to the lab where Mewtwo escaped from to try and find out more about Tim's dad. In this scene, I thought the villain's plan was actually set up pretty decently. I thought it was good how they were going through finding all these different Pokemon that have been experimented on, finding out that all the villains have been tampering with evolution, and with the holograms and all that, I thought it was set up pretty well. Although there were some weird shots in this scene particularly, and I didn't think that Justice Smith and Catherine Newton had the best chemistry. Also, in the hologram bit, we have probably the most out of place thing in the entire film. Rita Ora, who's in this movie, is just spouting out exposition in the most unnatural way possible. There are so many better ways for the characters to find out all the experiments with Mewtwo rather than just having a character who was there at the time explain everything just seemingly to themselves. It felt so out of place, so unnatural, and there were so many better ways that they could have done that. So after this, the team get chased by a bunch of Greninja. Psyduck has like an explosive headache, and then the ground just starts rising up and shifting and doing all this weird stuff. And this scene was really great. I felt this was the scene that had the highest stakes in the whole film. And it's so great because until it's revealed, you have no idea what's going on. The ground is just moving around all over the place and throwing rocks around and trees breaking, and you don't really know what's happening until it's revealed that they were actually on a bunch of giant Torterra. They sort of teased this a little bit earlier in the film, but it was still really well done in this scene. After this scene where Pikachu gets hurt, I also thought the film did emotion pretty well again. It was nowhere near as good as it was before, but this scene really helped to solidify the bond between Tim and Pikachu. It really showed the audience how much Tim had come to care for Pikachu, and also remind you of how much he'd lost already. After this, some Bulbasaur and Morolol lead Pikachu and Tim over to Mewtwo, who shows them some stuff that happened in the past to do with Tim's dad, and then Pikachu leaves. The thing is, Pikachu did not have a good reason to leave at all. In the memories that Mewtwo showed them, Pikachu supposedly betrayed Tim's dad. So he leaves because he thinks if he's done it before, he could do the same to Tim. This does not make any sense. Pikachu has amnesia, so he's not the same as he was before. Yes, he betrayed Tim's dad in the past, when he was basically a different person. The fact that he says he could betray Tim as well just sort of implies that he has no control over his action. But something I did think was good was when Pikachu sort of remembered everything that happened to do with the accident, with sort of faded versions of everything that happened in the accident reminiscent of the hologram technology from before. I just thought that scene was really cool, really well done. So the next thing that I've made notes about is the big parade scene where so much goes down. This scene just keeps throwing stuff at the audience in a really unorthodox way. So you find out that Mewtwo wasn't bad, then you find out that Howard was, and then you find out that Roger wasn't bad, and then you find out that the Roger that you think you've been seeing was actually a Ditto with the creepiest eyes I've ever seen. And then you find out Howard's plan to turn everyone into Pokemon. That was another thing I didn't think really made sense. For Howard, it made sense because he had this illness that had put him in a wheelchair. So it sort of made sense for him to want to transfer his mind into Mewtwo's body. But what reason did he have to fuse everyone else and their Pokemon? Going back to all the twists and stuff though, I feel like they could have handled this a lot better. Say Tim walks into Howard's office and they're just talking, and then Roger, all tied up like he was, just sort of falls out of the cupboard. At that point, Tim could look over at the Roger with the sunglasses and he could turn back into a Ditto. That's when Howard explains his plan, he turns into Mewtwo, and everything is just done in a much more cohesive way. But after that, this is what broke me. At this point, we still haven't figured out where Tim's dad is. So Mewtwo reveals Pikachu was Tim's dad. No. I hate this. It's awful. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add anything to the film. Honestly, I think it makes it worse. And this is the ending of the movie too. If you don't have a good ending, people aren't going to like your movie as much. The third act is so important. It was easily the worst decision in the film. There was no reason for it to be there, and it absolutely spoiled the end of the film. Other than that though, there were a couple things that I noticed, just me being a bit nitpicky, consistency errors. First of all, Pikachu called Tim by his name before he'd learnt it when they were running from the Apom. And second of all, Lucy was an unpaid intern, and yet she had her own office. Just a couple things that didn't make sense. The movie overall though, I thought was really good. It wasn't amazing, but considering the track record video game movies have, this one was great. It was great. I also just want to stress how glad I was not to have another Journey of a Pokemon Trainer movie. We've seen it 1,000 times, and the first live-action Pokemon movie deserves something better. This movie is a mystery film with Pokemon in it, and it's great. It's much more original, and for the first live-action Pokemon movie, it's exactly the sort of thing I would have wanted. Other general stuff about the film, I thought the cinematography was pretty good, the soundtrack was really good as well, and that credit sequence, wow. The acting was decent for the most part. I thought Catherine Newton and Chris Gere in particular could have been a bit better, and they definitely could have done more with Bill Nighy. But Ryan Reynolds and Justice Smith, as I've been saying, were brilliant. And finally, I just want to say how grateful I was that this film did Pokemon justice. It was faithful to the franchise in every way, and that is just something that as a Pokemon fan, I can appreciate so much. So overall, I think Detective Pikachu is a great film, especially if you're a fan of Pokemon. I mean, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've already seen the film because this is such a spoiler-heavy review, so those were just my opinions of the film. First viewing, I might add, because I am definitely going to see this film many more times. If anything, just to appreciate all the little details and Easter eggs for the Pokemon fans. So yes, those are my thoughts on Pokemon Detective Pikachu. Please tell me your opinions on the film in the comments below. So yes, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe down below. If you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, they're linked in the description. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.